Toxic people don't get confused by arguments. They get confused by silence. Because silence removes the script they prepared for you. It takes away the drama. It steals their leverage. It collapses their sense of control. When you stop reacting the way they expect, their control begins to weaken. Not because you said something powerful, but because you said nothing at all. Emotional intelligence is not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't prove. It doesn't perform. It's calm, and calm behavior terrifies manipulation. Toxic people survive on reactions. They provoke to feel powerful. They push buttons to stay relevant. They create emotional noise because noise gives them access. But when you move differently, silently, mindfully, they don't fight you. They don't challenge you. They don't even understand you. Because they were never prepared for peace. Here are 7 silent moves that confuse toxic people without you saying a single word. 1. You stop explaining yourself. Toxic people demand explanations because explanations give them access. When you explain, you open the door. When you justify, you invite debate. When you defend, you hand them control. The moment you stop justifying your choices, they feel locked out. No long messages, no emotional speeches, no defending your peace. You don't argue your truth, you live it. And that silence makes them uncomfortable. They start replaying conversations. They search for meaning. They wonder what changed, because suddenly they no longer have material to work with. This is not cold. This is not rude. This is self-respect. You are not required to translate your growth for someone committed to misunderstanding you. And when you stop explaining, something shifts. They feel the distance, but they don't know how it happened. That confusion is the beginning of their loss of control. 2. You respond calmly, not emotionally. They expect anger, they expect tears, they expect reactions, but you respond with calm. Not cold, not rude, just steady. Your calm tells them, I am not controlled by your chaos. And confusion begins. Because toxic people feed on emotional reactions. They are wired to provoke. They are conditioned to escalate. They are trained to win through emotional pressure. So when you don't rise, they feel exposed. They push harder. They poke deeper. They test more. And you stay calm. That calm becomes a mirror, and what they see in it unsettles them. This is emotional intelligence in action. Not reacting is not weakness, it is discipline. It is strength without performance. And that kind of strength disrupts manipulation. 3. You don't chase closure. Toxic people love unfinished conversations. It keeps you emotionally hooked. It keeps you wondering. It keeps you available. But you don't chase closure. You create it internally. You stop asking why. You stop needing answers from someone incapable of honesty. Your silence says, I no longer need you to understand me. And that terrifies them. Because their power was never in the truth. It was in your need. When you let go of that need, their leverage disappears. No final message, no emotional goodbye, no dramatic exit. Just peace. This is psychological detachment, and detachment is a form of control. When you no longer need closure, you become unreachable. 4. You set boundaries without announcing them. You don't give speeches about boundaries. You don't warn. You don't threaten. You simply change access. Less availability, less emotional exposure, less tolerance. They feel the distance but don't know how it happened because you didn't argue, you didn't explain, you didn't negotiate. You adjusted. And that's what confuses toxic people.
They are used to resistance. They are prepared for confrontation. They are trained for drama. They are not prepared for quiet withdrawal. This is power without noise. This is emotional intelligence without display, and it rewires the dynamic completely. 5. You stay unbothered by their provocation. They test you, they poke, they try to pull you back into old patterns, but you don't react. You don't explain your silence. You don't correct their assumptions. You let them sit with their confusion. Because peace doesn't need permission. And when they don't get a reaction, they lose direction. Toxic people navigate by emotional response. When the response disappears, they get lost. They question themselves. They doubt their influence. They feel irrelevant. And nothing scares them more than irrelevance. Your stillness becomes their noise. This is quiet power. 6. You stop sharing your inner world. Toxic people misuse a vulnerability. They collect your emotions like weapons. They store your words for later. They twist your truth when it benefits them. So you become selective. Not closed, not guarded, just wise. Your silence protects your energy, and they feel the loss without understanding why. They notice the distance, they sense the distance, they feel something missing, but they can't name it, because what's missing is access, and access was their advantage. This is self-protection, not punishment. This is clarity. This is emotional intelligence choosing safety over exposure. 7. You move on without proving anything. No revenge, no announcements, no dramatic exits. You heal quietly. You grow privately, and one day they realized they lost access to you. Not because you fought, but because you evolved. And this is where toxic people feel it the most, because they expected collapse, they expected chaos, they expected you to break. Instead, you became calm, stable, unreachable, and that silence is louder than any argument. This is the psychology of emotional control. Not domination, not manipulation, not force. Control of self. And self-control is the one thing toxic people cannot stand.
The truth they never tell you. Silence is not weakness. It's emotional maturity. When you stop feeding toxic behavior, it starves. And when you choose peace over reaction, you win without a war. This is emotional intelligence. This is mindful power. Not flashy, not dramatic, not loud, just effective. Because the strongest people don't fight for control, they remove access. And when access is gone, the game is over. Why this works psychologically? Toxic people operate on 3 things: reaction, access, control. Take away any one of them and the system weakens. Take away all 3 and it collapses. Silence removes reaction. Boundaries remove access. Calm removes control. That's the formula. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. You stop arguing. You stop chasing. You stop explaining. And you start living. That's when they get confused. Not because you changed them, but because you changed you. There comes a moment when you realize you don't need to be understood. You don't need to be validated. You don't need to be chosen. You just need to be at peace. And peace is the one thing toxic people can't manipulate. So you become quiet, not because you are weak, but because you are done. And that silence is freedom. If this resonated with your soul, you're not alone. Subscribe to Stoic Mindset Academy, where silence speaks and growth begins within.